Now that got turned. I just noticed that got turned off during the. It says we're recording now. All right. Okay. Okay. My recording light is off, but I see there's one in the corner of your screen now. All right, we're good. I'm sorry. Go right ahead.
All right. Just pick up.
Yes.
Okay. Terry is Robert's assistant. She has a tremendous history with the organization, and she brings with her a wealth of knowledge about the physicians, leaders, and staff. And Mr. Thomas was the one that donated the land on which the hospital was built. Karen and Robert began a tour of the hospital, and so during this tour they run into various people associated with the hospital, and first person they encounter is Patricia, and she's the director of surgical services. And while talking with Karen, she provides her with the priorities developed by leadership, which they're looking for: strong employee engagement, high patient satisfaction, quality patient care, being physician friendly, and achieving financial strength. And during the course of their conversation, she also provides 6 ground rules that the hospital is looking to operate under. No excuses, building team, bring up good ideas. If you have poor performance, it will be addressed. And the phrase, "this is not my fault," is not acceptable. And they're also looking to make sure that people within the hospital support each other and they manage up other team members. And so Patricia does express some concerns, making sure that people are being held accountable to the standards. And can't see the bottom part. And then we have Dawn. She's the Chief Human Resource Officer. She expresses her concerns of making sure that the workplace is attractive to current staff as well as staff that may be brought in. Retraining staff, individuals need to match the culture of the hospital. Make sure that we're addressing negative behaviors and attitudes of the staff, because a couple people expressed during the course of interviews that that's not always been the case for the hospital. And then supporting staff who need retraining or those who may be lacking the skills needed, and developing leaders who are capable of leading the employees. And Dr. Jacobs is a physician who emphasized that there needs to be a partnership between the hospital and the physicians. Okay, we have 2 places. Valley Medical Center, which operates in a small suburban community of about 55,000 people, is owned and operated by a large nonprofit health system. They have a 29-acre campus. It's 30 years old, have 1,500 employees and 375 physicians, 135 beds. Until recently, it was considered the sole community provider and the leader market. Many of the employees and physicians have been with the hospital for more than 20 years. And then you have hospital in Gainesville. It's located in a larger city. They can provide more comprehensive services. They're building a new hospital, which will just be 2 miles from Valley Medical Center, and it's opening in 9 months. And some of the strengths in the hospital is community focused, and it has the backing of the community. We have many long-term employees seeking outside help, which you can see that as they brought in Karen. Many of the employees are passionate, and that passion comes through during the interviews that Robert and Karen conduct while touring the hospital. And then you have the new CEO, Robert, who he classifies himself as an inspirational leader, and you can see that he's really engaged with his employees during the course of going through the hospital. He knows not only professional but also some personal tidbits about his people, and he's engaged with them and has conversation. He also seems to be visible as he's walking through the hospital. People know who he is. He started the process of painting the vision and began seeking hard solutions. He's brought in new leadership. He's changing physician strategies, and he's attempting to enhance market strategies.
So then you have some of the learning objectives that were stated. a notator there to support your understanding of the organization development competencies in the entry phase. That enhances the collaboration results. We thought that it's imperative that they have the interpersonal skills, effective communications, and the skills to determine the problematic systems in the organization, and at the qualifications for everyone and understanding the organizational design and culture. And they kind of identified all of those throughout the article or case study. Then to assist you in analyzing and organizing complex data and information in the contracting process, inferencing organizational needs, anticipating the needs of the client and the organization, questions that elicit deeper responses about the organization. Karen did a great job with follow-up questions, I think, to probe to see what other areas might have been of concern that she may not have received in the initial response from any of the physicians she's encountered or Robert. And of course, that goes into the analyzation of the responses that were given. And then the third learning objective was to identify core interventions, conditions, and deliverables from the engagement that need to be incorporated into the contracting process. Definitely have to define what the services are going to be needed. And that was going through that initial conversation with Robert, and then follow up through speaking with the other physicians, then determining what interventions were going to be used, things that were previously mentioned and used interventions that Robert stated that they've tried in the past, especially with the 4 previous CEOs prior to his arrival. And then also the new ones that would be proposed from Karen once they went back to the boardroom. Providing feedback, you're going to want to be able to get feedback not only just from Robert, but also receiving it as well. So you're going to give it and receive, which is essential into understanding that organization. And then presenting the final product, you got to have the oral and the writing communicational skills, so that way you can present that back to your client. And that's all part of that contracting process as well. The entry and contracting. The entry phase begins with the initial contact upon Karen's arrival. This occurs when the client and the consultant meet for the first time. And she also did the tour of the facility. And then contracting phase involves deciding what issues will be addressed during the consulting. So that relationship is imperative. That first impression is vital to whether or not you're going to be able to help that organization. Diagnosing what are their areas that they're wanting you to focus on, evaluating the feedback results, and then, of course, the formal proposal that you'll need to give for part of that contract. And then your data gathering, interviews with the employees, the staff, the nurses, secretaries, support staff, housekeeping, maintenance. You have leadership, and the managers, directors, all of the practitioners of their departments. So just kind of making sure we're speaking with those in formal and informal conversations. The observations, observing their employees, it could be a way to gather more data in their workplace. And then, of course, as the previous case, you could observe staff meetings. Then surveys, you could do anonymous surveys, 5-point Likert scales, just to elicit more feedback into the strategies that have been implemented in the past, and then also the new ones that are coming from Karen's recommendations and her proposals. And then your culture assessment. Does the culture meet the mission? Making sure that they align, because their core culture is to be family oriented, and want to make sure that that's provided as well.
Okay, so we started with some concerns and challenges for Valley Medical. So the first one is that they've had a string of short-term unsuccessful CEOs, so 4 in the past 24 months, and Robert makes number 5. There's been some instability, gaps in their strategy, not sure the direction of the organization. Not really sure where they want to go. The significant leadership changes in a number of executive level positions. And then also in those leadership positions, there's just been ineffective leadership. There's been lots of rumors of staff and physicians feeling afraid and possibly going to that competitor hospital. The market has become more competitive. They have lost patient volumes in their critical areas like surgery, cardiology, and oncology. So the competitor hospital is opening 2 miles away, so that is a concern. The lack of accountability, the complacency of the staff, their lack of focus, there's not really any teamwork, that also presents a challenge. The workforce, so retaining, recruiting staff. Leaders, there's leaders without training, and you can't be a good leader without training. The employees seem to be disengaged, and all that accumulates into low patient satisfaction scores. So another challenge that we found was making changes to reflect new market desires, seeking input from those key stakeholders. And then the financial operating margins are at risk. Now, in overall summation of all those challenges, we felt like the concerns deal with human capital. So your skills of the staff, your knowledge of the leadership, your productivity, all that is based on human capital, on people. Okay. So factors we felt like were critical for success for Valley Medical, we need to enhance that team-based decision-making. So getting everybody to the table. Maintain consistent and focused leadership. Again, with training. We always want to remain cognizant of the competitor services. We don't want to pretend like they're not there. We need to face that head on, that yes, there is a competitor coming 2 miles away. What are we going to do about it? We need to prioritize our opportunities and then evaluate how effective the interventions are through that data. It's all about the data. Just wait, I'm coming to that. So recommendations for leadership, and this is Robert specifically. We need to get that training for all managers. Again, you can't be a good leader without training. We want to engage the staff to make change. Call on those key people for ideas. We need to make decisions or make design changes based on that culture assessment. So our culture assessment reflects our shared beliefs and our values. So what are we going to change based on that? We need to assess resources. Are our staff allocated properly? And then again, what does that data reveal? It's all about the data. A wise man once said, if the data says go here, don't go there. And that would be our own Brandon. He quoted that the other night. Okay. Oh, and we also felt like regular meetings with the consultant, and that should be in the contract to assess that progress. Okay. All right. So finally, our recommendations. So we want to make sure that mission is reinforced and that it reflects the community. And that could be difficult with a big corporation that has multiple facilities. Usually they have one big mission statement. So really drilling down and saying, how can we live that mission? Professional development for leaders, as we have talked about. Continuing learning for all employees. We're adult learners. We need to learn continually. Assess and meet the needs of the community, really getting out there, talking to the people, what they feel like we need. And then along with that, plan for future growth and expansion, planning on new services, plan on building new buildings, making sure your policies are strong and that they are being adhered to, and then reaffirming that teamwork goal, making sure that we're all working as a cohesive team, and then finally making sound financial decisions regarding that market. All we have.
Can you go back 3 or 4 slides till you get to the one that is concerns, challenges for Valley Medical? Mm-hmm. All right. You have 10 concerns here for Valley Medical that you have done an excellent job in looking down. All right, I have a question for you. Robert's the CEO, right?
Yes.
And who's the consultant?
Karen.
All right. Why did Robert call Karen?
The concerns, I think, were from all all the need changes and making sure that they still keep.
If you had to pick, excuse me, Brandon. If you had to pick one of these 10, y'all have done an excellent job hitting all 10 of these. But if you had to pick one as the reason why Robert called Karen, what would that one? I mean, these 10 things are absolutely accurate. If you had to pick one of these 10 things as the reason why Robert called Karen, which one of these would be the one reason, the central reason why Robert called Karen?
I think maybe number 8. Workforce retain, recruit. Or it may be number 6. He may be nervous about that new place opening up.
I think combining that would be 7. To move forward as the cohesive team was one of the main concerns that he had. They can stay able to meet the needs of their community as a cohesive team to be competitive with the new medical center coming.
Go back one slide. It's on this page.
Number 5.
Number 5. In the end, Robert called Karen because of number 5. If he didn't, he's negligent. Because in the end, your primary responsibility as CEO is what? And you can't ever forget it. Your primary responsibility is keep the doors open. Period. Overrides everything else. He didn't call them. These other 9 things are part and parcel of that. But if the staff had just been disgruntled or there had been a lot of changes and they were still making money hand over fist, do you think he would have called? Maybe. If he's a good CEO, he would have called anyway. But his fiduciary responsibility, and David can speak to this, his fiduciary responsibility is to make sure that they can pay the bills every month. They can keep the doors open. That has to be first and foremost in organizations. Even if they're nonprofit, you have to be concerned with market share first and foremost. And in the end, and now that's very important, that in the end, the success of your consulting will be tied to all 10 of these things in your list of recommendations of the things to do. But in the end, how is Robert going to evaluate your services?
And his success.
What is Robert going to consider a success?
Their services are increasing. Back to that 5, that's how he's going to be able to evaluate and looking at that feedback initially because of that market share declining.
So in the end, Robert seems like a really good CEO, and he's concerned about his people. He started with, you notice he started with staffing. That's what you have to start with. I can show you that slide again. Good organizations always start with staffing. They always start with the right number and staff development and training. They always start, they understand it's always about the people. He's hit the nail on the head there. He started with staffing. But in the end, he has to be concerned with the bottom line. And so when he evaluates the services from this consultant, in consulting, you have to sometimes they don't even tell you what the real problem is that led to, and then all these other things are part and parcel of that problem. He's identified, the reasons why they're not being successful right now, but it all ties back to the reason he called is because they're losing money. They're losing market. And so in the end, he's going to evaluate Karen and her services based on what one thing, really and truly, You know, all these other things are going to be part and parcel of that, but in the end, he's going to evaluate whether they have stopped the bleeding in terms of financially, and have they turned it around, and now that if they are gaining share again, or at least not losing more share. All right. How does that influence what you do as a consultant? Knowing that it's, in the end, the bottom line is the bottom line. How does that influence what you do as a consultant? Move on to your next slide. Next slide. Next slide. Next slide. Next slide. All right. I would add another one to this list. And Robert may or may not be willing to share this with you. I would want, and it's part and parcel of number 8. I would want a financial accounting where you are, so that we can establish a baseline, because you better believe that Robert is looking at that. And in the end, he's going to, in the end, his evaluation of your services, you have absolutely hit every nail on the head in terms of what services you should provide for them. But the overall is we need a baseline so we can see if all the things that we did turned this organization around. David, chime in here. You're a CFO. You're an interim president of a community college. You're in charge of a large organization. What is the bottom line in your organization, David?
The bottom line is be able to provide services and stay within a budget and try to do it with the best return on investment you can.
Exactly right. Even in a nonprofit.
Exactly.
For some reason, folks think if you're a nonprofit, the profit doesn't matter. No. You have to keep the doors open. And I'll bet David hears FTE every day. What's FTE, David?
Full-time equivalent.
That means market share. In David's business, their market share is FTE. And there's always a competing business community college next door or the next county over, because there's 58 community and technical colleges, and they're all seeking to expand market share because they all want to keep their unit in business. Hospitals are the same way, exactly the same way. They build more, they branch out and try to bring in more market share. That's not going to stop. Somebody's always going to be building a hospital 2 miles away or opening up a satellite campus, that's the nature of the business. So in the end, that CEO, if he's fulfilling his fiduciary responsibility, he has to be concerned. You need to establish a baseline in your needs assessment and your evaluations of where you are right now in your program evaluation. You need to make sure that there's a financial component, that you establish where we are, so that in the end you can measure, where we are now. And even though employees might be happier and clients might be happier, that has to translate into more market share. You can't ever lose that focus as a consultant. They called you really for one reason. They were making money hand over fist. They were making money hand over fist, and their market share was increasing It's with the same set of problems that they have now in terms of employee disengagement, poor customers. Would they have called you if they were gaining market share? No. That's the nature of consulting. It always comes back to, in the end, the central problem is always the central problem, which is finance. They didn't call you because they were dysfunctional. They are. They could live with that if they were making money. The reason they called you is because they're losing money. And you can't ever forget that. You can never forget that as a consultant, that the reason that they called you is because they're losing money. So, in the end, we better factor that in and be cognizant of that. So somewhere in your processes here should be a financial accounting of just how bad things are.
Dr. Lamb.
Yes.
This statement that you just made about the bottom line kind of took me back to the book we read, the Toyota Way, and it talked about the Toyota organization, the TPS system, and how it's different, of course, from the American system. And I know we're talking about a profit versus a nonprofit organization, but basically their philosophy was to kind of grow and impact the economy through customer service more so than the bottom line figure. I mean, even when they actually created new vehicles, it was concerned, how do we grow and impact this economy? Is that a different philosophy than what we're accustomed to?
It is. But they're a strong, established company who can afford to do that and who sees the bigger picture. If they were a struggling company, struggling for market share, I'm afraid that their vision might be a little bit different. This particular unit is struggling to stay afloat, and they know that coming down the road here, there's a competitor that's going to hurt them even more. And so they're actually struggling for their fiscal, financial, or corporate life right now. And you know, I work with this almost on a daily basis, in that we want to be concerned with the services that we provide and the client experience and the people hiring our graduates and our product. But in the end, we have to stay financially viable. Market share matters, even in a nonprofit, situation like the college. Market share matters. When we have regular meetings, we look at enrollment. We look at retention. I mean, we 99% of our time is spent trying to figure out how to better serve our clients. But the overriding 1% on top of all that is we can't stay in business. All the good that we can do for our clients won't matter if we can't keep the doors open. But we have to pay the bills. That's the nature of all organizations. And I guess my point this morning is, don't be fooled by nonprofit status. You still have. That doesn't mean that we don't care about money, or that we're not interested in market share and those things. Unfortunately, it's the overriding concern of leadership, or it should be. How do we keep the doors open? And so, in the end, you can do some wonderful staff development. You can increase employee satisfaction. You can increase their efficiency. All those things will contribute to the bottom line. But again, in the end, the bottom line is the bottom line. So I always advise, Find out, understand as a consultant where you are first. And then in the end, so you can see where you are in the end. Know how dire the problem is. Understand the financial component of it. Understand that in the end, if they end up with happy employees, a more efficient organization, but don't gain market share, they're not going to be happy. They're not going to consider your employment a success unless you can address the central theme, which is they're losing. The reason they called you is they're losing market share. They might not even tell you that. But in the end, Robert he was pretty upfront about we're losing market share. We've got debt because we built that new wing on the hospital. You remember he took her to the new part of the hospital. We've got debt because of this. In our attempt to expand and provide better service, we undertook debt. We've got debt. We're losing market share in a time that with debt we need to be gaining market share. He mentioned some of those things. They were kind of hidden. I'll admit there wasn't a flashing light next to some of those things. But you should pick up on. He called because he's desperate, and he's desperate not because employees aren't happy. He's desperate because he's got debt and he's losing market share. That's the facts of life. So, I hate to always be the bearer of bad news, but organizational health is determined not by satisfaction of clients, or customers, or employees. It's determined by the bottom line, unfortunately. And you can never take your eye off of that. And always remember, they called you because of the financial situation they're in. Yeah, these other things are why they're in that bad situation, but they called you not because they want to make employees happier and more efficient. They called you because the financial situation is as dire as it is. And now the question is, we know that now. Does that affect our recommendation? It does. And you address that in number 8. That's excellent. I might move number 8 to number 1. But yes, you have hit the nail on the head in number 8. But, you might need to move that one to number 1 in real life. It's going to be primary. I had a dissertation I sat in. I might have told you this. I had a dissertation I sat in on. And the lady's dissertation was from a large urban school district in North Carolina. And they undertook a staff development program, not because they just wanted their teachers to be better trained, but because their elementary math scores were in the tank. And so I didn't feel like that the person undertaking, the lady that was doing the dissertation, she was part of the training staff where they were training elementary teachers in math concepts, try to improve the math scores. And I didn't feel like she really understood her task as the researcher, basically the consultant. She wanted to assess the value, the effectiveness, the efficacy of the training through whether employees liked it and whether they felt better about their math knowledge, and were they working together better. And she had all these indicators of whether or not the program was successful. And I asked, the butthole question, because that's why I'm there as the organizationalist is it seems to me that you've missed the point here. This would be a really simple one. What were your math scores before the training? And what are your math scores after the training? That would seem to me to be the indication of success or not whether teachers felt better about their math ability to teach math, but better, because that's why the district entered into this. It costs a lot of money. You start training 1,100 elementary teachers and spending money on the staff development, and they were breaking them into groups of 25. And I mean, this was a major undertaking. They were spending, hiring staff and spending a fortune on this training. Do you think that they entered into that financial equation with the goal of making teachers feel better or increasing their knowledge about mathematics? That's part and parcel of it. But the bottom line is the bottom line. And the researcher had not factored that in. To her, the success, because she had personal investment as basically the consultant, for her, the success was, what the teachers got out of it. That's part of it. But the overriding is the bottom line. The organization did not enter into that training for the employees alone. Their first and foremost reason for entering into that was, again, they were losing market share. Their kids, the scores were going down in math. What was their overall or primary expectation from this training? That scores go back up, that they stabilize and then start back up. Same thing here in this case study. The CEO is humanistic. He wants all these things to happen for the client system, for the for his staff. But the bottom line has to be, can he stop the erosion of market share and financial decline? Can he stabilize it and get it turned around? That would be his primary function as the CEO. If not, he's incompetent and he's not fulfilling his fiduciary responsibility. So the only thing that I would change about your presentation is I would move 8 to 1 here.
Okay.
And make sure that we understand that's really his primary thought process here in hiring you as a consultant. And you need some way to measure that as a consultant. So that's why you would start out with an accounting to begin with. Where are we financially? And can you show us historical financial data to show which way you're going? Have you leveled off? Are you moving downward every month? And then we're going to put all these things in place, and then we're going to do a financial accounting to see if we, hopefully have at least stopped the slide and have we started back in an upward direction. Because if that's not happened, they're not going to be happy with your services. No matter how good a job you did, they're not going to be happy with your services if you didn't stop the financial slide. That's the reality of consulting. Always remember, the bottom line is the bottom line in consulting. They brought you in to do all these things that lead to that success, but in the end, the bottom line is the bottom line. So even though the staff might be happy with the training, they might it might stabilize people leaving and all of those kinds of things. It has to go directly back to the profit. Have we stopped the decline? Are we gaining in market share? Hate to be the bottom line guy, but that's kind of the way it works in organizations. Comments, questions? Excellent presentation. Very pleased. You followed all the correct steps. You used the correct resources to do what you did. Your focus, again, is wonderful in terms of you understand the problem. And you've put a wonderful set of recommendations in place to address those problems. Very good. All right. Brandon, if you will who's going to go next? Who's doing the presentation next?
We're next. Bruce is first, so I can share my screen, or Bruce, do you want to share your screen?
If you can go ahead and do it, that'd be fine with me.
Okay. Let me get,
Okay, so Brandon, if you will make me the host again, if you will go to manage participants and either make me the host or make Lori the host.
All right. Lori's the host.
Okay. Do you guys see this?
Okay, it'll take a second.
Okay.
Lori is the host.
Okay. I've got this in a weird format, I think.
Your screen's not showing yet. Let's see. Let me. All right. I am now the host. Let me go to Lori and make her the host. Yes. Lori, if you will click on share screen.
Okay. Let me see where that is. Let me get back to this.
It's on your, it's on your
screen.
Yeah, share screen.
Okay.
There we go. There
All
we
right.
go.
You guys see it?
Yep. Excellent.
All right. So, Bruce, you want to go ahead?
Yep. All right. So let's talk about the people who are actually involved in this assessment here, this case study. We have Robert, of course, who was the CEO. He started about 6 months ago, and he's interested in prioritizing some challenges. He's seen challenges within the organization, and so he's actually trying to prioritize the challenges and react up on those challenges. One thing about Robert is he's a caring CEO. He cares about the organization and also about the people within the organization. He's hired Karen as a consultant. She's from Results Consulting. So her primary responsibility is to assess the organization and offer any recommendations to the organization. Terry, who's Robert's assistant, she has tremendous history with BMC, and so she's been there for a pretty good while, and so she's kind of seen the ups and downs of the organization as well. And we have Patricia, who's the director of surgical services. She talked about the 5 priorities developed by Valley's leadership, and then she also spoke of the 6 ground rules that mold the organizational behaviors to support the culture as well. And then there's Dawn, who's the Chief Human Resource Officer. Her concern is to remake of the workplace to attract and retain staff. She talked about getting the right people on the bus. And then there's Dr. Jacobs, who's the physician, who's concerned about the partnerships that are within the organization, within the hospital itself. Okay, the places is we have Valley Medical Center, which is a 135-bed hospital on a 29-acre campus, more than 1,500 employees, 375 practicing physicians. It's in the suburban area of about 55,000 people, and it's approximately 30-year-old facility. However, there is a threat within the community. The largest competitor is a hospital in Gainesville, and they're actually relocating their facility that's approximately 2 miles from Valley Medical Center to open in 9 months. Just some background here concerning BMC. In the past, past 24 months, they've had 5 CEOs. There's a concern with ineffective leadership at the executive level positions. One good thing is that, a positive here is that the facility land was donated by Mr. Thomas. There's a lack of focus and limited accountability in the organization. BMC is owned and operated by a large nonprofit health system. The mission is to provide excellent patient care And then there's a vision to be the market leader in clinical quality, patient satisfaction, and operational excellence.
David, you want to jump in?
Sure. And in terms of the current culture at the organization, they have instability in leadership that are creating voids. They've had 5 changes of CEOs in a 24-month period, which obviously creates issues related to strategy and long-term development of the organization. It was described in the article that there's complacency of employees, somewhat, I guess you could say, the lazy river mentality, that we could just continue like we are. There was also the culture of fearful employees. The employees do recognize that there is the larger hospital moving within two miles of them, and fearful of what that does for them. But also they understand the situation with the organization, that it has been unstable, and certainly fear can develop from that. There has been a lack of communication as a culture happening between management, doctors, and staff. There has been too much of individuals living in silos and not enough communication and sharing of information between various areas. There's been lack of communication within departments that was described as a weakness of their overall culture also. That would include that describe that if patients come in an area, they're going to interface with more than one area. Now, somebody could come into admissions and also deal with the surgical staff and deal with billing, and obviously they're going to have differing departments to deal with as a patient, and there was a question or concern of quality in doing that as a process overall. Culture, there was also management. Robert is desperate to fix the problems, and obviously he needs to be that with as much change and transition as there has been in the last 24 months. There's been unsuccessful decisions been made in the past by management as a history. And also there's a lack of long-term strategy to solve problems, and that can be related to the amount of transition that there has been, certainly in the last 24 months. 5 challenges that were developed by the board, and I think it's a strong statement that these were developed by the board and passed on to Robert, as these are areas to focus on. First was the strong employee engagement as a priority, but it was also described in the article that there were employees who had bad attitudes and there were untrained employees. And the question came into play really whether the employees had bad attitudes or were just simply untrained and not familiar with the tasks that they needed to complete, and therefore were not efficient. Another priority set by the board was high patient satisfaction scores. Currently, in their surveys, they're at the 30th percentile, but the goal was set at the 90th percentile, which is a dramatically higher bar to set than the 30th percentile. So the question would be is whether, again, that's a desperate goal, of whether that's a stretch that's too much, that's unattainable or not. Another priority set by the board was quality patient care. But there were decisions that would be made without the doctor and staff feedback. So again, individuals and departments living in silos and not communicating within the organization was occurring. Being patient friendly was another priority. But again, the departments, as I've alluded to earlier, don't interface well and certainly need to work on their processes of communication. And then the 5th priority set by the board was achieving financial strength. Problems related to that, they have lower patient volume that they've had in the past, so that's akin to less sales, less revenue. They have a declining market share, and they have competition coming in. Plus, they also have the additions to buildings, which are going to cause them to have as a continuum, the debt to pay and interest to pay, and it did allude to in the article that there was interest to pay, so that means those were financed. So that also is a major concern. 6 ground rules were set are described in the article by Patricia. Those would be that the organization is not going to take any excuses as to where they are. These also was the idea that they're a team and they're going to sink or swim together, and that certainly will be the case as they fight off the competition from another hospital that's moving into their neighborhood. Robert tried to initiate the idea of bringing in good ideas and open up the communication lines. The poor performance of employees in the past would be addressed, was also one of the ground rules. And that had to do with the idea that specifically, as I looked at it, one of those areas that could be looked at related to poor performance was it was indicated in an article that training was an issue. Certainly performance is related to training, and having efficient employees, you want to have somebody that's fully trained. And the phrase, "it's not my job," is not acceptable. It's other words, it's a team, and a team focus will be they're not going to live in their silos as they have in the past, and support and manage up other team members. Again, a focus on team and growth and moving forward was another one of the ground rules. And then the question is, how organization development can assist for this organization. They can use large group intervention as a methodology to go about doing so. They're in a situation of flux. They've had 5 CEOs in the last 24 months. They need to open the lines of communication within the organization as a whole and bring the organization together for unity, but also to set long-term strategic plans. So feedback can be coming in from a variety of areas, such as the physicians, the nurses, the community. And we've also included in here the board members, because obviously the board is, they're not pleased where things were at. Otherwise, there wouldn't be as many changes as there would have been in the last 24 months. So the board will have to be involved in this process too, to bring them about to where they need to go as an organization. And the overall process of organization development can assist by causing increased trust, open confrontation, problems. The problems definitely do exist in the organization, but working on resolving them as a team is the key. Employee empowerment and participation. Right now, there's too many people that are, again, living in their own silos, and they haven't effectively got feedback happening through the organization. Knowledge and information sharing. They need to go about the process of sharing what are going to be the defined goals as they go forward as an organization and how they can go about with action plans to meet those. The design of meaningful work, how they can improve their processes in the process will be essential to them. Cooperation and collaboration between groups and the use of full human potential, all advantages as they go about the process of organization development, and have further communications as to how they can better align their organization where they need to go in the short term and the long term to face the challenges they have.
Okay. One of the things that we thought about is clarifying the client. Of course, Robert is the one who called Karen, the consultant, asking for help, prioritizing the challenges and actions. His goals may be different than the overall goals of the medical center. When you think that he's pretty much a short timer at this point, he was there 6 months, the 5th of 5 CEOs in 24 months. So the problem was there before he got there. Is he really the client, or is Valley Medical the client? The identifying, identify the presenting problems. Several problems. The patient volume is down. The market share is down. Patient satisfaction, just as David said, currently 30% with the goal of 90, but the employee satisfaction is low as well. It's 50%. So Robert called with the need for prioritization of the challenges and goals. There are a lot of goals. There are a lot of challenges. What does he tackle first? That was kind of his idea and reason for calling. But there's other stuff going on as well. The engagement.
Can you stop right there? I'm sorry.
Yes.
Can you back up one slide?
Yeah.
I love this slide. Now, I think since you've got David on your team, I think you had a little hand up, a little advantage on this one. But I love identify the presenting problems here. Patient volume down, which means market share is down. That's what I was referring to before. Now, we're concerned that satisfaction is low for patients and employees, but again, the reason why he called is because patient volume is down and market share is down. I'm glad you have them prioritized that way. Excellent. All right, I'm sorry to interrupt. Move right on.
Okay. So the engagement steps: assess the readiness for change, assess the trust. Do the employees think Robert will be around long term? How do they view that? I remember when I first started at Gaston College, we did not have a VP, and I think it was about 18 months when I first started that we didn't have a VP. And one of the faculty members who had been there a long time said, administration comes and goes. We have been here for a long time. So I thought about that reading this article. You know, do they think they're there for a long time? Robert may not be. So how do they view Robert? So define the goals and the scope, determine the anticipated results, and define responsibilities of the client and the consultant. That's all part of the engagement and steps. The strengths and challenges of Valley Medical. They have a lot of strengths and they have a lot of challenges. So the strengths are long-term employees. The history, they're really part of the community. They've got a good rapport among the staff members, especially the staff members that have been there for a long time. They really desire to create a culture that is sustainable long-term. They have physician engagement. Some of the physicians they were talking about now desire to be employees instead of contract employees. There's a motivated and a positive new CEO, and Robert does have vision. The challenges are the recent CEO turnover, which does create an environment of fear, untrusting of administration, and the uncertainty of the future. There's a large competitor hospital with more comprehensive services. There's recruiting and retaining staff, and then there's leadership development as a challenge. Recommendations, and we have several. One is there's an overall mission and value for the parent company where this is a unique facility. Should there be an add-on to the mission that's specific to Valley Medical? So you can be under an umbrella of a bigger organization, but there might need to be something specific about Valley Medical. To create a more cohesive layout in the medical center and not have silos where each department is separated, to look at the big picture and to include the new OB tower. One thing I was thinking about when the other group was going and when you were talking, Dr. Lamb, is do they need to do something to set themselves apart from the other hospital? Do they need to specialize in something and become known for something? So should they become known with the OB tower? Should that be their thing? And then they would be the leader in that area for one thing. You want to do a bunch of things, okay, or do you want to be the leader? Similar to what you were saying about the current state of Gardner-Webb, really known for the graduate program. The undergraduate programs are declining. What do you want to be known for?
Exactly.
And spend your focus on that thing, and then you're the leader. So maybe they pick that thing they're going to be the leader in. Is that the OB stuff? The other thing that was interesting, and it's what are they mentioning in the article? One of the things they mentioned is the lab coat that the doctor had. And on the lab coat, it was embroidered operating room, not the name of the doctor, but the actual place which is creating that silo. So I thought that the clothing is a representation of the culture, things being compartmentalized, different areas working as if they're separate. So that was just kind of a clue. When we're looking at clues, how are you presenting yourself? So they're presenting themselves as the silo. Recommendations continued to revamp the priorities and ground rules, to be more specific, positive, measurable. There's a lot of overarching themes here. How are you going to measure that? You can say do this or do that, but what is the specific thing you're going to do? To create a leadership academy, the first group talked about this. I think it was Jessica. You can have good employees get promoted, but what then? You were a good employee, so you got a promotion. Do you know how to be a leader? So the Leadership Training Academy we thought would be a good idea. Address the culture that has been created due to turnover, looking at the priorities and the rules. The language I felt was punitive and untrusting. I think someone in a leadership position can come up with good ideas, but wording is so important. If you say sink or swim and someone's been there 20 years, they don't want to go down with the boat. So they might think, okay, I'm going to go ahead and jump now before the boat is going to sink. So no excuses, get the right people on the bus, sink or swim. I feel like all that presents a negative to the employee. So am I the right person that's on this bus? I have some concerns and you're telling me to bring my concerns forward, but then also you're saying no excuses. So I think that language is negative, and there seems to be a lot of friendly stuff happening, but is that just surface? Is there more concern? You did this last time we did our Zoom session, Dr. Lamb, so we thought it'd be interesting to do it this time to come up with what we thought organizational mission theory. I tried to do it in one word like you did, and that was impossible. So the mission is to provide excellent patient care. The vision is to be the market leader. The organizational theory, non-specific ways to achieve goals. There's a hierarchy, just like with the last case study. The organizational culture, Robert says it's complacent. The managers and employees are not fully committed to the collective principles and sharing of the common culture. There's a lot of reasons for that. I think it's the fear. I think it's the not knowing what's going to happen with this place. The organizational behavior, references the slide before. It's friendly on the surface, but is it really friendly? They're all just happy to see each other and shaking the hand of the consultant and, smiling from ear to ear. Is it due to the fear of reprimand because of the principal's rules? You keep saying no excuses. You're saying sink or swim. I'm smiling, but is that how I really feel on the inside? And then the effectiveness. The goal is to increase patient volume and market share, 90% patient satisfaction, and top 10 for employee engagement. So that's what we've got.
Excellent. Excellent. Yeah, I love, the goal is to increase your patient volume and market share. You can't ever forget that. It has to be primary as a consultant. They can tell you one thing, but there's a reason why there were 5 CEOs in 24 months. They're circling the drain. I hate to be ugly, but that's why you do things like that. That shows that there is desperation, and it's not because of working conditions, it's because of financial conditions. So let me go over some points with you. Excellent presentation. Both of you, excellent presentation. Let me go over some things with you that as a consultant now, these are some things to keep in mind as a consultant, besides the things that I've already outlined. When we talk about the goals, one of the goals of any goal that we would be looking at, I picked this one. Their patient satisfaction score is 30th percentile, and their goal is 90th percentile. What you have to do as a consultant is explain to them that there needs to be midpoint goals or indicators of success. We're not going to go from 30 to 90 the first in one jump. It's not going to happen. What you have to sit down with the client system and explain to them what would be reasonable in terms of a timeline of attaining that 90%. What would be our indicator of success for our first time period? Let's say the first 3 months, the first quarter of the next fiscal year. What would be a indicator of success? Would it be 40%? Would it be 45%? Surely you don't think we can make 90 in one quarter, in one time frame. So you have to do a little education in terms of their expectations sometimes on things like that. And we want to get to 90%. I'm not telling you that's impossible or unattainable. What I'm telling you is we have to have benchmarks or indicators of success along the way. That's one of your jobs as a consultant is to make sure that the client system understands that, and it's that way for any goal. I just picked that one at random. It's that way for any goal. Here you are. Here's where you want to be. Let's understand that it's a process, and that we will get there, but we can't get there the first day. All right. So that's part and parcel of your job. Now, staff development. I saw a T-shirt recently. I want that T-shirt. Probably won't be big enough to fit me, but I'm going to buy it and I'm going to make Dr. Hamilton wear it. And it ought to be the theme of any staff development or any organization. And the T-shirt said, "Don't complain about the results you didn't get from the work that you didn't do." And say that again. Don't complain about the results you didn't get from the work you didn't do. Organizations are they are famous for complaining about employees. Did you bother to train them? Did you do the staff development? Did you work with them about their performance expectations? Well, no. We hired them. We thought they were a good person. Colin speaks to that. Getting the right people on the bus, but then your job is to make them successful and train them and get them in the right seats to do all those things. Too many times when you're a consultant, when you go out, all you hear is complaints about how sorry the employees are. But then when you look at their staff development budget or training regimen, you see that, well, there's a reason why they aren't any good. That's on you as the organization. And so sometimes you have to be the bearer of the bad news as the consultant and say to the organization hierarchy, leadership, you're getting what you're paying for. You're getting what there are ongoing costs in employee development, called staff development. And if you don't do that, don't complain about the results you didn't get from the work you didn't do. And many of them don't understand that. I love that in this presentation that you are involving the board in what you're doing, because they are the people who change CEOs 5 times in 24 months. Obviously, they're not happy, and it's due to the financial state of the institution. But you need to bring the board along as well, not just the people who hired you in the organization, but the board needs to be a part of it always when you're working in organizations with board. I love that you talked about silos, and Lori brought in an excellent point about the clothing. That enforced the notion of, my department's doing great. And she brought in the Gardner Webb example that I have used is we're doing great in the graduate school. We're killing it. The nursing school, killing it. But we can't just be concerned with our own little world. Yeah, we're killing it. But we have to be concerned about the overall health of the organization. We can't stay in our little silos. And she made an excellent point as well. You may have to be the bearer of bad news as a consultant. Then you're trying to do too many things. Too broad, too expensive. You don't have the expertise. You may have to specialize. That may be how you survive and adapt. Dr. Hamilton is famous for saying organizations that don't adapt don't survive. And that's absolutely the truth. Just because we've done it forever doesn't mean that we're going to get to keep doing it forever. We may have to adapt and specialize. That's why the board has to be involved, because the board would be the people who would be ultimately making those decisions, if not the management or the leadership team. That would be back to the board. And that's why it's important. That's why I have these two together. It's important that the board be along for this ride, because it may be that, hey, we're going to have to specialize in OB and objective. Excellent point, Lori. That may be what they have to do. And that may be part of the bad news. And so that's why the board needs to come along for this ride. Leadership training. You mentioned that the staff needs leadership training, and absolutely they do. Now, I want to do a little quick mini lesson with you on leadership training. What you're looking for is empowerment. You want staff members to become empowered to be leaders. But there's 2 types of that. And pardon my NASCAR reference. I'm not really a fan, but people in this part of the world kind of get it. Big E and Little E. If you're a NASCAR fan, you know what I'm referring to. Big E was Earnhardt Sr. and Little E is Earnhardt Jr. So think of it as Big E and Little E. Big E is empowerment as an organizational leader. Little League is empowerment as a leader in your own specialty, in your own department. And what happens too many times with leadership training is we only focus on the silo approach, training you to be a leader in your area, just your area. When we have to expand that, yes, that's important. We want you to be good at your job. That means Little League means being good at your job. If you're, if you're a nurse, it means being a great nurse. But Big E means training you to be a leader throughout the organization and think beyond your little silo. People won't do that normally. They only think about what's in their own best interest in their department or their division. And you have to provide them training, Big E training, to look at the bigger picture. So when you're talking about leadership training, remember, that knucklehead Dale told us, Big E and Little E, we have to focus on both. If we want to get them out of their silos, if we want to get them out of just their own little world, we can't just train them to be great nurses. We have to train them to be great nurses, and we have to train them to be leaders throughout the entire organization, the entire hospital. And that goes for any organization that we're in. Big E and Little E is important. Empowerment as an organizational leader and empowerment as a specialist or a leader in their department or their specialty. Both of those trainings have to be provided. When we start talking about, don't complain about the results you didn't get from the work you didn't do. The staff development and leadership training it has to be specific and it has to be general. You have to have both. Otherwise, they'll just stay in their silos. You have to get them out of their silos through training.
Dr. Lamb,
yeah.
as it relates to staff development, just a question, and I think about my organization now. We have some software that we train our faculty on to use, and you had said earlier with the earlier group that there should be a measurable outcome. If we look at what was a measure before and look at what was a measure afterwards. So if we do an hour training on this particular software and no one is using it afterwards, how effective is that effective training?
It's not. I mean, you might be the greatest trainer in the world, but if everybody goes back and does what they always did, then it's of no value because you got no outcome. We always have to look at the outcomes. Perfect example, Bruce, and that's what I was talking about, Big E and Little E. Too many times we focus only on the Little E part where we're training you to use this software, and then but they need training as to the big picture of why we're using it as an organization and how that creates leadership capacity throughout the organization, not just in your department. But too many times when people don't see the big picture.
That's right.
They don't they stay in their silo and don't adopt because they don't see it as being a bigger issue or a part and parcel of the entire organization and the organization's entire effectiveness. That's exactly right. Perfect example of what I'm talking about. And then the last point that I want to make, and I will raise my hand guilty to start with. I was out doing clinical work this week, and I was in Chapel Hill, Carborough, and I ran across a principal there, and we entered into a discussion about organization. And she referred me to this company that does organizational development training, called Bell Consulting. Absolutely top notch. Done some work on that, and we'd like to bring them in BOL. And she was telling me about some of the training that they were doing through Bell. Bell does corporate training. It's not school-based. It's corporate training. And she said that the leader of the session that she was in said, everybody raise your hand that uses humor as part of your leadership style. And so everybody in the room, everybody thinks they're funny. Everybody in the room raised their hand. She said, now, keep your hands up. Everybody, keep your hand up if your predominant leadership style in terms of humor is sarcasm. And she said, unfortunately, everybody in the room, most everybody had to keep their hand up. And she pointed out, sarcasm is passive aggressive. It's not really humor. It's really a form of aggression. And I was so glad that Lori brought that point out. That sink or swim kind of mentality, no excuses and all those kinds of things, that's really a form of aggression. Employees may be in their silos because they're afraid to step outside. I did detect that, although this new CEO is very humanistic, I did detect a lot of passive aggressiveness throughout this case study. 24 months, 5 CEOs, no excuses, sink or swim, all that kind of stuff. But that circles back to the central theme, which is we're losing money, we're circling the drain, we're now desperate, we're about to go out of business. The blame game is going to get started here pretty quickly. But more than just for this case study, I would encourage you, and I need to hear this advice myself. I would encourage you to understand that throughout your leadership style, and this is, you're getting a doctorate of education in organizational leadership. Throughout your leadership style, there's really no place for sarcasm. I detected some of that in this one, but that's aggressive. That's not being funny. That's not humor. And that kind of struck me as I was rereading this one in preparation for the day and taking these notes. That I did detect that overall tone of this organization was somewhat aggressive, but that's because they're desperate. And so you're right. When you walk in as a consultant, they may be smiling and everybody you meet, but I think Lori hit the nail on the head when she said she felt like there might be some fear involved in that. I detected the same thing. That's absolutely. And there's always going to be fear for your job when you're not doing well organizationally. That's why it's always the overriding thing. The employees aren't stupid. They know if you keep losing patients and market share, that they're not going to have a job. They get that. And they know that, people are quick to blame. And, in this scenario, the first thing that we started with is, the employee. If you ask the employees of this organization how upper management feels about them, what they would tell you is they're blaming us for the problem, whether they are really or not. But I got that tone here as well. I thought Lori was very perceptive in that. I got that tone as well. And so you need to be careful as the leader that with how you interact with people in terms of placing blame or using sarcasm. Sarcasm is really blame. You need to be careful in that. I didn't detect that in the leader, but I think the organization had been through, 5 new leaders tells you that they're blaming you for the problem. So these are all things that, there are lessons for leadership in this one. There's also lessons as a consultant in this one. I think this is an excellent one. You both have done an excellent job of identifying what needs to be done, the central problem. I hope that you've learned something from doing this. You learn to use the tools, at least, of the trade, and that if nothing else, that's of a large benefit. You learn to use the tools of the trade. If you ever want to do some consulting, at least you have now been exposed to what you would be expected to do with the tools that you expect to do it with. Questions, issues, problems? All right, let's look at going forward. We're going to be on campus next weekend, next Saturday at 9 o'clock. Anybody have any special requests for breakfast? Let's get to the important stuff now. Anybody have any special requests for breakfast? Just regular biscuits and move on. All right. Make sure you upload all your required materials from this one, just like you did last time. Be sure to get all that stuff in this week so that and do the reading that we'll need to have done for next week. Anything else for the good of the group? All right, so let me see. Let me see if I can do the leave meeting on my end. Y'all all have a good week. I'll see you next weekend. Bye-bye.